Well, we're here at the CCA Workbench and the Academy Outdoors.
Yep.
We got to talk about rigs and techniques, of course.
Correct, and we're talking about Permit. You know, Permit is a really powerful fish. He's chased a lot in this state. He's a jackfish, so he's a strong swimmer. He's got that big tail, big wide body that he uses against you when you're fighting him, and he's just a great fish to catch. And you know, some people even eat him. I hear. Most people let him go, but some people eat him. So anyway, you probably let all yours go, right?
I do.
I know you do.
I do.
And you were talking before that you could catch them in two different places. You catch them in the flats or on deep water wrecks. Is there a certain time of the year that you chase them one place or the other, or are they in both places at once?
That's a great question. You know, what happens, Dave, is they show up in the spring, you generally on the wrecks. It's part of a pre-spawning gathering, you know?
Right.
And so that's when you find them, when you heard Jimbo talking about up mooning and flashing, that's what you see in deep water most of the time. Versus swimming down the edge, just like Jimbo described it, is what happens when they decide to break up after that spawn, and now they just start to go make a living individually instead of in big groups.
Now, are they always like in just by themselves on the flats, or is there like more than one?
You'll see two
threes?
or three at times. You know, sometimes, you know, in Key West, which is a very, very permitty area, you'll see 4 or 5 swimming down the edge. And the smaller fish have a tendency to be more in the groups. The singles, the bigger fish, have a tendency to be by themselves because they don't want to have to compete for what food is there.
Right, but they're on that flats. It's going to be a high tide kind of fishery. That's like
It's
bonefish
always
and whatnot.
the last 2 or 3 hours of the incoming, and maybe the first hour of the outgoing is your higher percentage of tide because that's when you have the most water on the flats. So,
That's
good
when they like
question.
to get up there and try to eat stuff.
So you heard Jimbo talk about the right size crab,
Right.
And he
We'll show
said
you
a
some.
silver dollar. So I'll show you. Here's a crab.
Ooh, and a shrimp.
See, this crab would be the right size for a tarpon. And let me show you what we use as a measuring tool. If you can lay this crab, and we call him an A-OK crab, if his shell is inside of that, then what would happen is that's the perfect
good
size.
one.
If he's too big, then what ends up happening is you can feed a permit probably this,
I'll hold this one.
in a big group, you know, in the Gulf. But look at the difference. See how his body fits perfectly. Now that to me is the right size. You can see the difference here on these guys as far as the size. You know, now when it comes to rigging them, or however you're going to hook them the same way. I'm going to put this little guy, use him, he's a volunteer.
Right.
We could use a 5-0, 4-0 circle hook. We're going to just hook them right here in the side.
It's hard
My
to get
hands
through
are
there,
wet.
isn't it?
My hands are wet. Anyway, we wiggle that through. I'm gonna
They're hard, aren't
let you
they?
do that, Dave,
Okay.
because my hands are wet. I can't do it.
I gotcha.
But while you're doing that, the key is that you're going to want, if you're fishing on the flats, I like mono. You can use braid. You're going to have a big leader. But ideally, what you're going to do if you're fishing on the flats is you're going to use a tiny split shot so that the current allows the crab to fall into the grass. Remember this, Dave. Presentation is everything in getting a bite out of a permit. When you throw, we want to crash the crab or even a big shrimp. We want to throw it right in the fish's face so that it's a reaction bite, but don't move it when he sees it. Because if you twitch it, it's not natural. He wants to eat this crab before it gets to the grass. He's going to dive like this, and that's why we put that additional split shot, because on the flats and you're fishing on the channel edges, the current is a lot stiffer. So if you close your bail and the line's tight, a lot of times this crab will skim on the surface, and they don't like that as much. Now, crabs aren't always available. So what you would do with this is you would want to use like a J hook. If you don't have a J hook, you can simply tail hook a shrimp.
Or even a jig, huh?
Right? And hook him like that. Or that's a great thing. The jig, they love yellow. You heard Jimbo talk about yellow. So you could take, in either case, a crab or a shrimp and either hook them in the tail or hook them in the, come out the top of the horn here like this. And that works really well. Same thing, you can just hook him right here in the corner where the hook would go here.
Right.
And then that way in 30 or 40 feet of water, you'd be able to get that to come out and drift as it sinks. You're gonna throw a 50 or 60 foot cast, put the rod in the rod holder, and just let it settle and sink down, and that jig head will take it.
And that's when it'll eat it.
Yep.
Beautiful.
You did a great job.
Good job, man.
All right, Bree.
Yeah, good job, Dave.
We ran out of time, man.